You're listening to The Brand Compass, conversations to navigate your way to building a brand fit for purpose and poised for success. Here's your host, 𝗘𝗣𝗜𝗦.
Hello there, my friend, and thank you for clicking on us. As always, I appreciate your time and your ears. In today's episode, we're going to have a conversation with someone who's incredibly talented in helping people like you and me bring our stories to life so that we can share them in ways that make a difference and get people to take notice and engage more with us. If you're a regular listener, you know that this is the place where we get together and we chew the fat on all the ways in which our personal brand meets the humans we serve. And frankly, one of the best ways to do that is through conversations that we have with clients and colleagues, but also through the content that we create. Now, in previous episodes, I've talked at length about the work that goes into personal branding. In episode 34, I literally broke down the 4 big areas: the personality, purpose, positioning, as well as presence or experience that you work on when you do your personal branding. And in the last episode, number 55, I actually shared all about the power twins of imagination and knowledge. Now, underlying that work is really getting to the crux of all the bits that make you such a unique human, where your genius lies and what brings you joy. And of course, how you came to be standing where you are today, doing the work that you are, and most importantly, in the way that you do it. In this episode, I've invited someone to sit with me and have a really good, comfortable conversation about how you can take all of those deep insights that you get from doing this important personal branding work and then start to permeate it into your everyday through stories. So let me introduce you to my guest and then we can get stuck in. So Caiger is a German-born, British-based strategic business storyteller who works with brands across the DACH region, the UK and the US to help them to connect better with the right audiences, drive B2B growth and attract top talent. She runs her strategic copywriting business from Poole in Dorset, where she lives with her husband and their 2 young children. Hello, Katie.
Hello. Thank you for having me, 𝗘𝗣𝗜𝗦.
I'm so ready for this conversation. You know, like storytelling is my addiction. So I'm really fascinated to get into this with you. And after we kind of had a bit of a chat about what we were going to do today, I reflected a bit on how I'm such a huge fiction reader, right? Like I mow through books like it's ridiculous. But when it comes to business books, I'm pretty selective of the ones I can actually finish. And then I start thinking, like, why is that? I'm a voracious reader. But I've realized that not many business professionals actually know how to tell a story and share their knowledge in a way that's engaging. And I think I just get bored really easy with facts and dry bits. So I'm going to ask you to kick off our conversation. When it comes to storytelling in the workplace, how important do you think it is for us to harness the skill of storytelling as a business professional?
Wow, okay. I would say storytelling has never been more important because it's never been noisier out there. I don't know about you, but when I scroll through any social media channel today, it's I find myself getting so stressed and so overwhelmed really, really quickly, and I just put the device down and carry on with my day. Mm-hmm. So it's really hard to actually cut through that and grab a reader's attention because, as we know, attention spans have never been shorter and all that. And there's so many things being said about Gen Z and Gen Alpha and how it's getting even worse there. So I would definitely say everything begins with you understanding your narrative. Now, I do believe, though, that the term storytelling is a bit misleading for some because people think you think of a story, you might think of fiction, like you say.
Yeah.
You might think of, once upon a time, you might associate it with people blagging or making something up. And that's not the case, like at least not how I work. It's more about unearthing what's already there and finding a really good narrative that triggers emotions, whether it's somebody viewing something, somebody listening to something you put out there, or somebody reading your blog post, something that resonates. So it's more important than ever before, and it will get ever more important as we go on.
And I think part of that is probably I call it consultant speak, that professionals end up speaking in highfalutin jargon where they might understand what they're saying, and they, you know, some of the audience who are colleagues might understand what they're saying, but the broader spectrum of people who you're actually trying to draw to you or kind of weave your stories to, they don't get it. So what storytelling, I feel like, helps you to do is simplify language and concepts as well. Like you say, weave in that emotional element, but then you're actually able to say more in less words, but do it in a way that's a lot quicker and to the draw. Because as a consultant, you will just, you know, you could talk 3 paragraphs, but actually there's probably only about 2 lines of those 3 paragraphs that you needed to get across in that moment. So I don't know, storytelling feels a little bit like you've also got to create those stories, don't you, depending on where your audience is in their journey as well.
Yes.
So storytelling, you said already there's, you know, storytelling being a bit misleading, but we're also talking here about multimedia in terms of images and also video. And you mentioned a little bit about those generations. I think I'd like to kind of get your, because you've got clients who have asked you this, or you've had to kind of dig into this with them, because, you know, our workplace environments have also changed. So we also have this more technology. We've got more remote working, more video calling. And as well as doing all of that as business owners, we've also got to think for the future as well. And part of that is thinking, well, which generations are going to have a disposable income, right? So in the next couple of years. So to your point of talking about Gen Z and Alpha, can you tell me a little bit about how you feel like these generations have grown up in these digital worlds? Like, how is that affecting storytelling and how we tell stories?
That's a really good question. So I read the other day that in 2030, 30% of our workforce will consist of Gen Z. And but yet when I walk into companies, there's nothing being done at the moment to attract them or appeal to them in any way. With Gen Z and Gen Alpha in particular, they're so used to instant access to high quality information at their fingertips. Now that's only going to get worse.
Depending on your
or
point
faster.
of view.
You know, the instant gratification, the instant access to high quality content at their fingertips. That also means that we have to tell the right stories on the right platforms in the right content format to hook them. We know as brands, we only have seconds to hook them in the first place, but because they're natives, those generations, we weren't. I mean, I was 14, 15 when we had a modem at home all of a sudden and it made a screechy sound in the living room. And okay, the internet's here. But they're natives, so they're very used to, they can tell the difference whether something's AI generated or whether something is genuine. They know that because they're growing up with it. So they're very focused on connection and relatability, on authenticity. And even though it's such a big, broad term that's been overused, but they really want to like you when they buy from you. And it goes further than that. Storytelling will become so important because 3 out of 4 consumers, they rely on social media for their purchasing decisions. So 75% of all people, they go on social media to then buy stuff, which is, I think, is huge. And there are some great businesses out there leveraging that already. But what it will mean for the job forces as well, that at the moment it's between 6 and 7 out of 10 people, they stalk their companies before they then apply for a job there, or before they decide and buy something from them. So it's a huge playing field at the moment, and it's fairly level because the arrival of social media has democratized that. It's fairly cheap to run ads on TikTok at the moment. It's fairly easy to do. You can do that from your living room. You don't need a fancy multimedia studio in Canary Wharf anymore. So everyone can tap into that, but there's huge potential right now.
And then I know I'm Gen X, so I'm not one of those two. But for me, what I'm really enjoying is seeing storytelling being pulled into advertising, but in a really good way.
Yeah.
Some do it in an incredibly naff way, and it just does not hit the mark. Either that, or I'm not their audience. But I like that adverts are more story based now, as opposed to here's the feature, here's the benefit, here's the click buy now button type of thing. There are more stories, which I like, but you can do that on organic content as well. But
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, but the important part, isn't it, is to kind of do that brand. We were having this conversation, weren't we? Like, when we do the brand work, it's to pull out, the things that you want to come out almost intangibly in everything that you're saying and the narrative and the stories you're telling. So it's important to do that bit about reflecting on what are your values and what is your tone of voice and how do you want to come across. Because I don't know if you found this, but if the Gen Z and Alpha are looking for authenticity, they're going to be one of the first to feel that disjoint or that jolt where a brand doesn't end up sounding like it should, or doing the things it says it stands for, or going against the things it stands for. So that part for you, when you start working, because I know you're a strategic storyteller, so do you want to tell us a little bit about what the differences of that, of someone just being a content writer, if you like? Because I know you work more long-term with clients. So I'd like the listeners to hear a little bit about what does your workflow actually feel like and look like with a client?
Yeah, thank you, gladly. I I like to say that my job consists of asking really, really pertinent questions. So yes, you're right. I like working long-term with people because it's a massive process. Telling a story, and worst of all, telling your story, takes a long time because everyone's got the little backpack, and we need to have a little rummage around and see what's there and see what you can put out there and see what you might not be comfortable with sharing, which is totally okay. And we work that out together. So I handhold most companies in that creation process, starting with, because every company has a shiny EVP, let's say, and they know exactly who they are. They've got their mission and their values all written down, and they've done a few workshops, but then they're struggling to actually find the right words to disseminate
or the right
online.
Stories to tell. So that
exactly, and that's where I come in, and I ask the right stuff so we can create something almost sustainable. I don't really believe in trends. Yes, you can hop on a trend and make a funny video, but I believe in evergreen content that's true today and that's true tomorrow, and that always feeds into your values and your longer term goals and your overall strategy and all that. So it's a very analytical kind of role, and it's almost forensic, like my approach. Nice. Because I look at everything under a microscope, and it's very helpful because when you're so in there and you know your own story, you can't escape it. You can't see the woods for the trees, and it helps to get somebody else on board, like with you and the personal branding aspect, to actually go, no, hang on, you've got a great story. We need to put that out there and clarify what it is you actually want to communicate.
Because ultimately we're always coming back to, aren't we, people by people, and ultimately if the only stories you're telling is how your new product fixes somebody's something, that's okay, but it's not what's going to make somebody choose you over somebody else, really, is it? I'd like to pose a question, like, where do you think, is there still a place for long form content? Do you think that there's still a place for a mix of short and long?
Yeah, that's a really good one, and something I've been asked before. And I think my answer is short-term content is fantastic for product discovery, when people fall in love with you, and you can build a bit of hype and create awareness and all that. However, because they're so used to instant access to great information, and because these coming generations, they really want to feel that connection and know they're the right fit, they're going to want to jump in and go down the rabbit hole and find out everything. So long-term content is not dead. It just has another purpose now. And when done successfully, your short-term content is the right sort of, the top of the funnel. Great, people know about you, learn about you, fall in love with you. And then the further they go, you're going to have great white papers, great reports that put you out there as a thought leader and create authority. And that can be done really successfully.
When I was thinking long versus short, I was thinking like in terms of long form content, as in podcasting. That's 30 minutes of listening to somebody, or a blog post being pages and pages. So yes, they are long-term content as well, isn't it? And then the short form is the stuff that's almost the teasers that are either getting you to go and digest that long form content, or like you say, is the short-term stuff that is kind of standalone. They're almost like little cherries on a tree, and you're just making things kind of attractive and pretty and discoverable as well. I just wondered whether you thought like the whole, because we've always been of the ethos within our agency is like pick one form of long form content, whether that's video or blogging or podcasting. So I was hoping you'd say, yes, Shelley, it's still good to keep doing that.
Oh, 100%. And it always depends on who's consuming, who's, consuming your content, because we see this trend, like look at the Diary of the CEO. The average podcast and episode length is about 3 hours. I mean, I've listened to a podcast over a few days that was 4.5 hours long the other week. So there's that, and there's always going to be people who prefer the quick and the catchy and the scrollable. So I guess it also very much depends on your target audience.
And what they're happy to digest. So maybe, okay, so we've kind of talked about everything quite high level. I wonder if we can bring it down to like a practical level now. So you've worked with a couple of different clients in different kinds of industries as well, abroad and in the UK. Can we talk through some examples of how maybe that people can relate to, like how does something then turn into a story? If you've got some examples of ways in which we can take away listening to you going, oh, okay, well, actually, I can start to almost put a little story lens on everything that we're creating at the moment. Like, where do we start? Or do you want to start with an example, and then we can go into some tips if you like?
Yeah, of course. I would say, first of all, look at what is a story. Actually, it's a moment in time where transformation happens. So therefore, there has to be an obstacle, or there has to be some sort of tension or a problem that needs solving. And if you break it down into its easiest parts, it almost becomes obvious, because everyone's got obstacles and problems and challenges. Ergo, everyone's got a story to tell, and I think the pressure when we begin with the whole storytelling and, you need to produce more content and you really need to show your face on social media, the pressure is enormous. When I go in and train employees, for example, because they think, oh gosh, I'm just a normal person, I've got my bachelor's or whatever, and I'm very straight-laced. I don't have amazing stories to tell. Everyone's got great stories to tell. It's just finding them and finding those moments of tension or challenges or a little bit of a problem, but you overcame it and you took something from it and you had to develop and evolve. So I would say on a practical level, sit down and have a think, or go for a walk and really have a think. Where was there a moment in time when you really struggled, and what was your goal before, and how did you overcome it, and how did you evolve? What was your learning from all that? Because everyone's got something, we all lived long enough. If you're listening out there, we've all lived long enough to overcome some sort of struggle. And then write it all down and pretend this is never made for distribution. This is just for you. But if you've never even written down your own story, it can be a great first step to really become aware, and put those content lenses on and really, really zero in on your own challenges. And then you can zoom out and focus on your business and where there was a point in time where your business was struggling perhaps, or, when there were moments of tension or whatever. So it's very transferable, but it's honing those skills to actually spot a story. And then you can, when you've done that, you can jump right in. So I'm a big fan of jumping straight into the story, like start with the middle, Tuesday morning, 8:15, I was doing the school drop off or whatever, and everything was running smoothly until something happened and I had to overcome it. And so it's very fast paced, and it draws the reader into the story. And everyone's got something, because we've all lived long enough. So on a very practical level, I'd say sharpen those skills to really spot those tiny storytelling opportunities in a day-to-day. And then if you haven't done so, write down your values. You absolutely couldn't live without. And write down four is a good number, 4 topics that make you, and that perhaps, if you're a business owner, sum up your business. And make sure that whatever you write and whatever you put out there and whatever story you tell, everything always feeds into those values and topics. So you never go off-piste, because that can be really confusing. So on a practical level, those would be the first steps, I'd say, to anyone.
And also the only thing I'd add to that is when you are looking at, so when we do origin story work with our personal brand clients, we remind them to go back on the different chapters of your life. So don't try and look at, what have I done since I've launched my business, but go to like early childhood. What happened between the ages of 1 and 5 or 1 and 10? And then what happened when you were a teenager, because everybody has different, like you mentioned, obstacles or tensions or challenges. Some people might have had that all in their first 10 years of life, but everything else was fairly tickety-boo. Whereas other people might have had more of that tension going on in their teen years or their young adult years. So try to keep an open mind, I think. Would you agree? Just to have a look at your whole lifespan, as opposed to just, I started working at 25 and I've been doing what I've been doing for 20 years, that kind of thing.
Yes, I agree. And one of the very first questions I ask anybody when we start working together is, who were you around the age of 8? Because that's when you've sort of formed your worldview and you sort of know who you are and who everyone else around you is, who your safe haven is, and what fuels you, what drains you, that kind of thing. And that's where we start connecting. So yes, go back into several different chapters, and if it's too painful, then park it, put a pin in it. There's some chapters might be a bit raw and a bit unprocessed, so just park it, go back to something a little more comfortable. It's not about washing your laundry. What's the
out in the open?
Out in the open.
Yeah, I can't even think of the words, but yes, it's correct what you just
said. And also allow yourself allow your own story to evolve, because invariably when I work with people and they've never done this before, and now they know their own story or whatever, they think like, these 11 lines I've got about myself, they're like cast in stone now, and they must not change because I've got it now. But of course, if you look back at the story you wrote about yourself 2 or 5 years ago, it might have been a vastly different focus. So let's allow yourself, give yourself that breathing space as well to create something new about yourself and let your story breathe and evolve over time.
I like that. I like that. I think the only other tip I'd probably add to your two of kind of look at your life story, look at your values, is entwined with that life story is if you do a strengths exercise now and actually try and evaluate what your strengths are. I think what's really interesting when you know that and come to know that better about yourself is you can track back to the times in your life where actually those things started to become a thing and you became really good at it. And there's a reason why, like, you know, like in part of my story was the element of, you know, my mum and dad's divorce and, you know, whatever was going on in the house at the time is, my radar as a young person, I became very aware of, I don't know, you know, the emotions that were going on, all the twitches in body language and behavior and things like that. And then today now doing my strengths, strategy and empathy are at the top of my my top five, within my top five strengths. So what that just means to me that I was already starting to build those strengths at a really young age. And today, how am I actually now using that in my work? And that becomes a story as well, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Beautifully put. Yeah.
So look at your strengths as well. So your strengths, your values, your life story. Like it. So we're coming to the end now, Katie. What would you say is the one big myth that people have about storytelling that you'd like to kind of clear up right now? Is there a myth, or is there something that really annoys you with people that talk about storytelling but don't seem to get it right?
Yes, absolutely. Most people are scared, I think, because for most people, they hear storytelling, they think vulnerability. They hear storytelling and they think I'm going to have to spill the tea and talk about everything that really hurt me in the past. And it's not about that. And and like you, Shelley, and we talked about this previously, like I'm a big fan of never sharing anything that hasn't processed fully.
No, exactly.
You know, you don't have to put anything out there you're not comfortable with. And that's a very, very important point. It's your content, your rules. If you're a business owner, it is absolutely down to your rules and whatever you're comfortable with sharing. And I see a personal brand as like the little picket fence around your values and your rules and your ethics and
guardrails.
Yeah, never to be crossed, because for a reason, right? Same as I talk about my children or the concept of having children, but I don't mention their names or I don't really go into detail because that to me is private. And I like to distinguish between personal and private stuff. Park the private, that's only for your dinner conversations, but really decide carefully what it is about your personal life you're happy to share with the world. And
we said, didn't we, like it's important to just reflect on this, because what people end up doing is they don't share anything. Like they hold back everything because there's maybe 2 or 3 things they don't want to talk about. It's like, don't do that. Like, yes, put your guardrails in place. Think of those things you can't talk about, but actually there's a world of things you can talk about.
Yeah.
I think that brings us to a close. Thank you so much, Katie, man. It's been really good to chat to you, and I think we could probably break this down a bit more. And I think what I'd like to get is some feedback from the listeners as well, because there's lots of little tidbits in that conversation there that we could quite easily pull threads on. And, you know, as we know, we could just put the world to rights. So if anybody listening today, Katie, wants to find you, seek you out, work with you, how can they do that?
Stalk me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is still my biggest, most prominent channel. I've got a website, House of Words, but LinkedIn is definitely your safest bet.
To grab you and stalk you in the kindest way.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, man. I encourage everybody to go and listen and consume your content on LinkedIn, because to be honest, you really demonstrate exactly what it is that you're trying to teach and tell others to do as well. So I find you a really useful model of excellence, if you like, to go, okay, that's that's how she's telling her stories. Like, what can I do? Like, how do you know what I mean? So it's really lovely for people to, even if they don't want to connect with you, just go and follow and consume your content, because you're a great example of business storytelling. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Shelley.
It's been lovely. And that's it for today, folks. So thank you so much for joining us. Did that help you to realize how important storytelling is? And has it made you stop to think, you know what, Shelley and Katie have a point? Do you find yourself naturally drawn to people in your world who seem to have this knack of keeping your attention, and you find yourself leaning in closer, wanting to listen to what they have to say? Storytelling is not something everyone can do, but this is why we need to lean into what our own genius zone is, right? So I would urge you to work with proper storytelling, copywriting geniuses like Katie, and stop stalling. Remember, trust is built over time. Storytelling can get you there faster and bring you closer to your audiences. Stories can clear the mist and bring understanding and resonance together beautifully. Who do you know who could do with hearing this conversation and Katie's insights? Share this episode. You know you want to. Until next time, my friend, stay strong, believe you have value, and make good brand decisions.
Thank you for listening to The Brand Compass. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share it with your entrepreneurial friends and help them make good brand decisions. Until next time, let's keep the conversation going at 𝗘𝗣𝗜𝗦𝗢𝗡.com.